It's State of the Water, where we bring policymakers, movers and shakers from across the country to discuss issues on the national level that impact you locally here in Hampton Roads. I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. Sundays at 1:30 on Blazing Hot 91. State of the Water, where policymakers, movers, and shakers meet. An initiative of the Center for African American Public Policy at Norfolk State University.
Blazing Hot 91.
Welcome back. We are here with Dr. Eric Claville at the State of the Water, and we're continuing with our guest, Mr. James Boyd, the president of the Portsmouth chapter of the NAACP. Eric, it's so good to be here and having Mr. Boyd with us today.
It is. Thank you so much for having us, and welcome to State of the Water. You know, Mr. Boyd, we understand that symbols of oppression and discrimination continue to be displayed in our communities. Some say it represents heritage, others say it represents hate. But Hampton Roads isn't free from this controversy. Today, we want to find out how you feel about the issue and also talk about the state of the Confederate monuments in Portsmouth.
Absolutely. And again, that number, 757-823-9110. Call in with your questions. Were you there in Portsmouth with the monuments? Have you been out there? Give us a call. Eric, go ahead, Mr. Boyd.
Mr. Boyd, what is your take on the monuments that we have here in Hampton Roads, and more specifically, the Confederate monuments that represent some say represents heritage, and others say it represents a time period that was just flat out wrong?
Well, first, thank you, Eric, for the question, and thank you for the work that you do in our community as well. First, let me say unequivocally that those are symbols of hate and bigotry and racism, point blank, period. The symbology of what they represent, the Confederacy, and we know, all of us know, if we're honest with ourselves, what the Confederacy represented in this country. So let me say at the outset that they are symbols of hate. What you're seeing across Hampton Roads and across the country is people are getting tired of those symbols being elevated in our cities and our communities. Like, for example, in the city of Portsmouth, the monuments represented, if you go back to the historical nature, as Dr. Benita Alexander mentioned on a news piece, that was a place to where it was a whipping post. The old courthouse sits beside the monument, and our people would go into the courthouse, have some semblance of a trial, which was not a trial, more of a lynch mob, and they would take our people to that whipping post and whip them in the middle of Times Square. Well, what they erected a symbol, a Confederate statue, monument, where that whipping post was when it was removed and taken to Richmond. So the symbology of it is definitely hate and oppression. And what you're seeing across the country and what happened in Portsmouth is people being tired of looking at those symbols enshrined in the middle of Town Square after continually having the conversation about having them removed. And let me say real quick, in Portsmouth, for example, the then Mayor Kenny Wright, the then Councilman Dr. Mark Whitaker, put forth a proposal to have it removed. We came out as NAACP to support that call. We came out again in 2016, 2017 after the situation in Charlottesville, where our mayor made a commitment to have it removed. It had a majority vote by council to have it removed, but they used the courts to delay it, to have delay tactics, to do the politics of it, and it remained in. And then here we were in 2020 having the same argument, same conversation, and having the same no action.
Brother, President Boyd, you mentioned something very important, and we like to deal with here on State of the Water, and that's the historical context of what these symbols represent. The fact that you mentioned it represented a place where former slaves or slaves were actually whipped. I mean, you know, is that displayed anywhere, that historical context displayed on the monument at all? Is there a historical markers or anything representing that? No. There's again, well, you can say that the Confederacy will represent that ideology, but there's if you look at it, there's little markers that say Courthouse Square, and if you were to Google Courthouse Square, the things that were happening in the early 1800s around that area, you will find references to what actually was happening there. So yeah, you're right. It represents the continual murder in a lot of cases and lynching
slaves in our community, in our country.
Wow. And you know what? One thing about those monuments, especially one in Portsmouth, persons don't realize that those monuments are actually registered on the National Registry of Historical Places.
That's right. Right.
So, now to have it removed, it takes an extra step, if I can use that analogy, in order to have it removed. It's just not something that someone put up a sign and you could take it down with a city ordinance. You have to go through many, many steps.
Well, not any longer, Eric. It was a time where you had to go through a couple of steps. And now, with what the General Assembly has done with laws, cities and municipalities have the ability to remove them. The challenge comes in the court when you're seeing the daughters and the sons of the Confederacy coming to claim ownership of these monuments. And so there's this court battle. But strategically, if you heard what the Attorney General said, that he was not going to move any legal action against cities that chose to remove them. So now it's opportunity for cities to make a leadership example like Norfolk did, like the mayor of Norfolk did, and have those things removed from the middle of town square. So now's the time for us to get it done.
757-823-9110. That's 757-823-9110. What do you think about the monuments that represent and the symbols of our area of Hampton Roads? Is it heritage? Is it hate? Is it miseducation? Chime in. Give us a call on State of the Water to let us know what you think about these symbols and what should be done. We're talking now with the president of NAACP of Portsmouth, President James Boyd. Now, I want to get into the current events as it relates to the monument in Portsmouth. Can you tell us where that Confederate monument is actually located in Portsmouth?
Yep, it's located right on Court Street. If you are familiar with Portsmouth, by the Visual Arts Center. It's in between the Visual Arts Center, TCC Visual Arts Center, and the old courthouse building that's in the Old Town section of Portsmouth. And it runs, it's on Court Street, and you can, if you're on Court Street, you can't miss it. It's right there in the middle of what they call Town Square, which is a Old Town reference to that part of the city.
Now, if you're coming downtown Portsmouth, if you're getting off the interstate or trying to maneuver downtown, is there any way to avoid that monument?
Not really. Not if you're in the Old Town section, downtown area of Portsmouth. You're more than likely going to run. You're going to run into it.
So it's a prominent location for the monument, and it's a prominent figure for the city of Portsmouth.
It is, right. And if you look at a lot of marketing material that the city has, or that other agencies have hosted about Portsmouth, you will see the monument in a lot of their marketing material.
What do you think that is saying? What type of message do you believe that's sending to the people of Portsmouth and people that want to come and visit Portsmouth, and for all of the historical sites, or even bring their kids there for a Saturday? What do you think that's saying to the people?
Yeah, well, it's saying, Eric, clearly that the good old boy system, racist, bigoted system that has existed in Portsmouth and still exists in Portsmouth, is still being enshrined in the middle of town square. It sends a symbol of not diversity and inclusion, which, by the way, most cities who have found ways to work in this diversity and inclusion and equity space are doing very well because people feel welcome, they feel inclusive, and they feel like they can work and play in a city that is not discriminating against them based upon the color of their skin. But when you have these symbols in the middle of town square, you're sending a clear message that this is who we are, this is what we believe, this is what we stand for, and it's clear. So when you have it on your marketing materials and things of that nature, and our estimation, people are less likely to come, businesses are less likely to invest in a city that has that type of ideology. But to be clear, it does represent a system of bigoted and racist structures that still exist in Portsmouth today.
Now, Eric, I've seen, and I know you've seen as well, some people are saying, well, put up a placard and explain it. Don't take it down, or take it down and put it in a museum, but to take it down completely and not to, put any information about it is rewriting history. What do you think about that, Eric? And Mr. Boyd, what do you think those that say, oh, keep it up there and just put a placard there to explain it?
Well, the question becomes, Benita, what is history? Yeah. History is simply, in short, his story. Mm-hmm. So who actually wrote the story and from whose perspective? But I think it's important, as Mr. Boyd stated, to look at the historical context of what that location meant and actually what those symbols represent. Mm-hmm. So going back to it being a whipping post, a punishment of corporal punishment for African Americans, has that symbol, do you believe, does it still encompass that today for the people of Portsmouth?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't tell you. Matter of fact, after the incident happened with the monument, if you had driven down that area, the traffic had increased tremendously. And the reason why is because there were conversations that were being had. Now, they were difficult conversations amongst citizens of the city, but they were necessary conversations, right? What happens is when you have an absence of leadership to stand on the moral position of right, what happens is you have these outward expressions of enough is enough. And so what's happened is not the leadership of the city, but the citizens of the city force these conversations. And I think they're necessary conversations about race, about where we are as a community, about whether it represents history or not. Let me say to that point too, Benita, I think the history of America is well documented. Yes. There's one thing to say that you want to document history, and then there's one thing that when you say you want to enshrine it, that you want to worship it, that you want to protect it. Those are two different things, and that's the position of those with the monuments. It's not just to document history; it is to worship it. It's to protect it. It's a semblance of a heritage of hate that they want to protect in this country. Because we're seeing, again, on the political scene as well, what we're seeing coming from the White House, America is in the middle of a crossroads to what we're going to be. And those oppressive symbols, which, again, wasn't too long ago that we were dealing with segregation, those elements still want to protect that kind of America, that kind of mentality of make America great again, take it back to what it was. And we have to make a clear statement that those symbols, that structure, is not going to be allowed. We are not going to go back to chains around our necks or knees around our necks. And so, yeah, we're going to stand up against it. But to answer your question, Eric, it is forcing conversations in our city that are overdue.
So with those conversations, and you mentioned segregation, and you're right, we're talking, 40, 50, 55, maybe 60 years ago, where people who are still alive today were alive during that time period. And it's a major issue to have these conversations, but they need to be had. Now, I want to jump right into how the issue and the controversy of the monuments escalated in Portsmouth. Several weeks ago, what ended up happening, you were out there, you and the vice president of NAACP. Tell us about what happened there.
Sure, absolutely. So the night before that happened, I believe it was I think it was Tuesday night, we had gone out to have a peaceful protest at the monument. What happened is council was voting to remove whether or not to remove the monument early that Tuesday. They had decided to go again with the delay tactic. We're going to send it to the court to get an opinion on whether we can remove it, all that other stuff that they've been saying for years. So they decided to have the delay tactic again. So we went out that evening to have a peaceful protest at the monument. Now, here's what the interpretation was from the chief of police and from the city manager that evening. You're able to have a protest at the monument. If you're not familiar with the monument at Portsmouth, there's a fence that is around the monument, right? You're able to go inside of that fence and have a protest as long as you don't deface the property. You're fine. So you can cover it. You can do whatever you want on it. You can protest, what have you. As long as you don't deface it, you're fine. So that's when we came out there. We had covers. We put covers over the Confederate soldiers on the monument. Peaceful protest lasted to about 2 a.m., a little after 2 a.m. We leave the monument, and we find out that there is a individual at the monument that is taking the cloth off of the monument that was already approved to be up there. We go back out there to put the cloth over the monument, which again was allowed by the chief of police and the city attorney. Now, this is about 7 a.m., 8 a.m. that we went back out there. Now, 6 hours later, the police chief comes back out and says, well, now we're going to declare this as trespassing. The question that we had is, how can something be trespassing at 2 a.m. and not be trespassing at 8 a.m., 6-hour difference?
Right. How
can we have that kind of interpretive law to where it can apply to one set of people and not the other, right? So again, we had video of an individual, a white individual, going up on the monument and removing the cloth. So if it's trespassing now, why wasn't trespassing for that individual? So we went out there again to do what we were allowed to do and to have a peaceful protest. Here's where the escalation came in, Eric. Instead of allowing citizens to exercise their First Amendment rights, which was allowed again 6 hours previously, they now want to declare it trespassing. And then what made it escalate was they put us under arrest for what they said was trespassing at the monument. Let me give you the background story to that. In order for something to be trespassing, you know this, Eric, is you have to have somebody complaining or owner of the property to say that you're trespassing. Well, at the time, the city was not, they have declared it now, but at the moment, the city was unclear whether or not they owned the monument or not. So there wasn't a complainant that was saying, hey, you guys are trespassing on our property. No, they decided that they had enough of us protesting at the monument and that now they were going to declare trespassing and now they were going to put us under arrest. So
now, has there been a determination of who owns the monument? I mean, it's on public property.
Right.
In essence, it's being maintained by public tax dollars.
Exactly right.
But there was a controversy of ownership.
Exactly. Which now the city has declared that it is the owner's, which means it is public property, which means that the upkeep has been paid, as you mentioned, with taxpayer money. So now they have declared it after they put two individuals under arrest to make some kind of statement.
And I could see how it could be confusing for someone. At one time it is, at one time it's not, and that could be very confusing. But let me give that number, 757-823-9110. We're speaking to Mr. James Boyd. He's the president of the Portsmouth NAACP. Were you there at that march for the monument? Do you live in Portsmouth? What questions do you have? 757-823-9110. And Eric, I could see how it makes no sense in what he's saying. 1 hour it is, 1 hour it's not.
Right. And basically what we see now, Benita, is that we're going through a series of changes, major changes, right, not just in our country, but locally. Symbols and actions and conversations that normally were not being had or normally stood as normal is not normal anymore. Mm-hmm. So what is the next step for these monuments here in Portsmouth, President Boyd?
So what you've seen is you've seen certain leaders coming out courageously to stand on the side of right. You saw where Norfolk immediately started to remove their monument. What's next for us is what happened is council has placed a large fence, which they spent $10,000 of taxpayer money to put a fence around the monument, which we were advocating for them to do in the beginning. But now they have put a $10,000 fence around the monument and have used more taxpayer money to put a large tarp around the monument, and until they say they're going to remove it, right? Even though the governor, the legislation has passed in July 1 that says you're able to go ahead and remove them, they are still trying to force what they say has to be some kind of community conversation, community forum for people to express their will for what was to happen to the monument. And I want to make it clear, Eric, and Benita, to your listeners, and to those council members that may be listening to me right now, you are playing with a dangerous situation. The citizens of this community, of this city, have made their voices clear about that monument. And it is time for us to be courageous to remove it. For the sake of all citizens of the city of Portsmouth, it ought to be removed. Black folks in the city are not going to wait around any longer. We are tired of being sick and tired. And again, the beautiful thing about it is it's our community and there's other communities that are saying, hey, listen, this oppression that black folks have been dealing with for generations is not right. We have to stand against it. And so citizens are saying that. So I would say to our leaders, you now have the ability to be courageous, not to look at the political landscape, not to look at what's politically right to do, but what's morally right to do. You can remove it today. Don't spend any more taxpayer money around a fence. And let me say this too, and then I'm going to be done on this point. They put a fence around it that's cemented in the ground. Cemented fence posts in the ground around the monument. Now, that does not say to us that this is a temporary solution.
No way.
That says a cemented, permanent. What happens is when you commit crimes against racism, they do things like this. They put up fences. They put up laws. They put up walls. They put up a wall around the border to Mexico is wrong. A wall around Confederate Monument in Portsmouth is wrong. We're not going to stand. We're not going to stand for it. And so again, the next steps they say is it has to be some kind of community forum. But again, I would say to those leaders, you're playing with a dangerous situation. You ought to remove it now.
Wow, that is simply unnerving.
It is unnerving, actually.
And President Boyd, you're right. These monuments, these symbols, we not just see it in Portsmouth,
right?
But you mentioned Norfolk, Richmond, but even in New Orleans, it was removed by the mayor as well. And across the world, we see these symbols that have represented oppression, discrimination, hatred being torn down across the world.
Across the world now.
So the question becomes, Benita, will Hampton Roads as a whole in every city within it, will we lag behind the rest of the world? So this is a very important issue. And, the other question that comes up is, once these are removed, and let's just say they are, let's just say tomorrow, President Boyd, you get a phone call from the city council and say, we want you to come down. We're going to remove this monument. And what happens is, right now we have a call.
Caller, you're live on the air. We can hear you. What's your name, please, and where are you calling from? Hello, you're live on the air. This is State of the Water. What is your question, please?
Yes, hello?
Yes, we're here. What is your question? Go straight ahead. Go right ahead. We can hear you.
Oh, yes. Hi. My name is Tiffany Carroll. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. What's your question for President Boyd?
Oh, yes. My question for President Boyd is, through the Black Lives Matter movement, do we see any movement on nationality and getting blacks to understand more about their heritage rather than just the label of black, but more so their nationality so that we can, utilize unity?
Okay.
Thank you so much for your question. President Boyd?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for the question. We see to where in this moment we are also making sure that we have a clear understanding of our identity and who we are. There's a lot of Pan-Africanism, Pan-African conversations that's going on as well, for us to make sure that we connect to, where our roots are and understanding our background and our heritage. Because here's the thing. We don't have to have American society define who we are. We have a rich history as a people. We have a rich history as a community. And we want to make sure that we're promoting that because we don't do it enough, right? We don't do it enough. And that is a part of that and or, not the or conversation, but the and conversation that we have to have in our community. That's the conversation that we need to have in our community amongst our people. And that's what we're trying to do. But again, that's not a conversation that other communities should worry about. They should worry about the oppression of our people continuously for generations that we have experienced in this country. And we'll have those conversations about our identity and our history and who we are, our value sets. And again, going back to that Pan-Africanism piece, that we're having those conversations as well. So great question. You're absolutely right. We have to make sure we're doing that as well.
The issue of history and knowledge and knowing who you are keeps coming back up over and over again. Hopefully some of our K through 12 administrators and educators are listening as they see how important history is.
Oh, it's very important. As I mentioned, my little 4-year-old, I want things to be better for him as he grows up so he can conduct and have a conversation with his peers, because at that point, it really, at all points, but especially during his lifetime, I want to see a difference. And I know many of our people want to see a difference too.
We do. We don't want our children growing up having to answer these same questions.
Right.
And so forth. But I will say, on a state level, our governor has answered that call by having a commission to help review and incorporate African-American history into the SOLs, into Virginia history, and also the commission in order to remove discriminatory laws, from our books. Can you believe that there are still laws from Jim Crow that are still in our books that are located there? Is that absolutely amazing? But I want to get back to this quick question that we had about the monuments. I want to pose this scenario to you, President Boyd. Let's just say you get a phone call tomorrow. The city council says, come back. We want you to be here. We're going to remove the monuments. Now, the question becomes, if we remove the monuments, where should they go, if anywhere? And what should replace it, if anything?
Well, here's the thing. We are advocates of their destruction. But also we mainly are advocates of it being removed from town square. So whether it be now, clearly, we don't want it just to be moved to another section of our city and have it enshrined in that section of our city. So we, in terms of the association, have been proponents of having them destroyed, or having them on the monument that says to our Confederate dead. So you can have it somewhere like in a graveyard part of the city. But honestly, our main thing is to have it destroyed. What happens when it's removed and destroyed, what happens is we're going to be able to have conversations in our city that have been long overdue. There's a number of proposals that could happen. We could erect another monument or another symbol in the middle of town square that is about fairness and equity, somebody or something that represents that, to where we could have moments in our city where we can all come together at the symbol, have these conversations, and talk about substantive policy that we want to move forward that is equal and equitable and fair and inclusive. We could do that. We could erect those things there in the middle. But again, it starts with us making a moral, courageous stance of saying, let's not have this symbol be in the middle of town square. Let's not have this symbol speak for us. This is not the kind of Portsmouth that we want to have. Again, now here's the alternative, Eric. Unless you want to have this symbol, unless you want the symbol of Portsmouth to be the Confederacy and oppression and hate, then you are an advocate for it to remain where it is. But if you want it to be a different symbol, to where all of us, despite the color of our skin, can have a Portsmouth that we all can live, work, and play in, and not worry about these oppressive symbols, then you'll remove it. So that's step number one. And then from there, there's a plethora of things that can happen, a symbol that can be erected, or we could have a different, define town square differently. But again, it starts with the removal.
President Boyd, you've given us a lot to think about in your work at NAACP, but more specifically in the community. What you've represented speaks for itself. We'd like to thank you for being a part of our show today, Hampton Roads Voices and State of the Water. Before we leave, how can the public keep up with you or through social media?
Absolutely. So, one, you can go to NAACP.org if you want to join the NAACP. Our branch number is 7104. So you can join the Portsmouth branch there. Or you can follow us on Facebook if you just type in NAACP Portsmouth. The same thing on Instagram and Twitter. And you'll be able to keep up with us and what we're doing. You could have those avenues to send us a message, and we'll get back with you with some contact information. That way you can join the movement that we're trying to promote here in the city of Portsmouth.
President Boyd, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you so much, sir. Eric, I'm telling you, it's amazing what he told us in terms of the symbolism and the moral agenda that we need to have, and we're starting to see even more so.
And I'm glad to see it as well, because many times these decisions are made unilaterally. Right. They're made by the power brokers of our communities. But now we see the public. We see everyone having a chance to give their voice and have their voices heard in order to come together to make a better decision moving forward. These symbols have been here since the 1800s.
Absolutely.
And today, in 2020, it's amazing we're seeing the change that's happening. It seems like at light speed.
It does. I was just getting ready to say that. It seems so quickly, but as the president said, President Boyd said, that we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so that's why it seems like it's going very quickly.
Shout out to Fannie Lou Hamer, the great civil rights activist.
Absolutely. It's been a great show, both Hampton Roads Voices and State of the Water. And so it's important that we look forward. So let us give you the phone number just in case, or we have a comment line that people can call on. Give us your ideas and suggestions. 757-278-4308. That's 278-4308. Leave us some questions, your suggestions on topics. And don't, again, forget to follow us online. It's at Hot91 online, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It was a great show. Absolutely, Eric.
It was, and we're looking forward to it even more so. Thank you for listening to State of the Water. It's State of the Water, where we bring policymakers, movers and shakers from across the country to discuss issues on the national level that impact you locally here in Hampton Roads. I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. Sundays at 1:30 on Blazing Hot 91. State of the Water, where policymakers, movers, and shakers meet. An initiative of the Center for African American Public Policy at Norfolk State University.